if you want to take an action, you can make any action cartoony. Anything you do can be cartoony. A sneeze can be cartoony. A character just turning their head could be cartoony. But my hair, it's so bouncy after what I did to it. It just felt like someone hit me in the back of the head. Tangents, yay. So any action can become cartoony. Part of it is how fast something happens. So let's say you have an object and you want it to see, again, the music got very loud all of a sudden for all of you. I apologize. I hope it is not bursting out your eardrums. I can hear a little bit of the music on my end, but it's hard to say exactly what that level is for everyone here. So I do apologize if it's going up and down today. So let's say you had your spacing here and you're taking action. We'll just say a ball moving across the screen. So you've got this object and it's moving across the screen, and let's say naturally it takes maybe, we'll say 8 frames to cross the screen. So you would have an ease out. So it would be maybe 1. So we've got frame 1 here and then frame 9. So that would be frame 2, 3, maybe it'll ease in, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, ease in there. So it's this kind of gradual motion that can make it work. So, okay, it's going to be this slow transition across the screen. For cartoony motion, we would just shorten it. Take those frames and take any motion. So if character going like, hi, and make it faster. You just pop it. Just cut out frames from that motion. That's kind of the first thing to start getting used to the feeling of cartooniness, is just make it faster. If you're going to have a character take a step, cut out some frames. If you're going to have them wave, cut out some frames. If you're going to have them stand up, maybe they're sitting here and then they stand up in a very cartoony way. Maybe they sat on a tack. Instead of the usual motion of, oh, got to put my hands down, push myself up, all of that, which takes time, you cut it out. So now, let's say we have frame 1 and we cut out some frames. Let's say we'll cut out 4 frames and say now this whole action is going to take 4 frames. Well, now we cut out those frames. Now we need to make the spacing work with this new method. And typically what we want to avoid with cartoony animation is spacing that is too broad. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So something like this. That's still pretty broad in terms of you've got the ease out, the motion, the ease in. And what this creates is if you have like a bunch of motions like this, so let's say you have another motion here. Hopefully visually this is making sense. So let's say you have another whole a motion here. We'll go to frame 9, and then another here. We'll go to frame, let's say 17. Or actually, let's do it this way. So it's going to be frame 13 and then to frame 17. Okay, so you've got your main keys here, your main poses right there. If you keep the spacing too even, you're trying to space things out because you're moving there. What it'll create is this very even feeling in your shots. So even looking at this, you can see that overall spacing, even if this is a hold here, it starts to create a little bit of evenness. So even though they're moving fast, it's kind of, it's boring. So once you cut down the timing, you want to exaggerate the spacing and have things either hit or start a little bit faster or slower. So for example, maybe the character is sitting down and they sit on attack and they just kind of bounce out of their chair. So you would have the sit here. This would be sitting on attack on frame 1, and you would exaggerate your spacing. You wouldn't put the typical ease out because, well, we're trying to shift all that weight, we're moving the weight. No, just go and you just hit right into there. There you go. This is frame 2. And then instead of going, okay, we've got frame 2, that big exaggeration, now we have to ease in like that. No, because now you're like fast and then slow. Try to exaggerate that. So you go 2 and then 2, 2, like that. So you just really force that ease in there. That's going to really make it sharp and cartoony. Now, not all cases are like this. Sometimes you'll want it to be another way. So maybe on this turn here, they jump up and then they go and they turn to see who stuck the tack on their chair. Well, maybe here you would do it a little differently, where you have a little bit of an ease out, where the head just kind of starts to indicate the turn, or maybe the eye direction switches and the head starts to tilt. And then if we want it to be very quick, we could maybe favor frame 13 and then into frame 17. So this kind of be something like this, where he's looking, little anticipation motion. That's this. It starts to turn, then and then eases in very closely at the end there. And that's just going to exaggerate that timing. And you can see just by looking at this how we're not having that evenness in there. So that's going to be the first two things, timing and spacing. That's going to give you that cartooniness, that general feeling. Now, this then starts leading into all the other elements of cartooniness, because when you do this, suddenly things aren't going to work correctly. It's going to feel very poppy if you're just animating it like you would animate a normal motion. So for example, if I have this ball moving here, let's clean this up here. So we have this ball here, and then it's starting to speed or come out. So it's going through. Our spacing of the sphere leads the eye very well. I'm sorry, usually my circles are a little bit better than this, but my hand is half asleep. So the spacing of this leads the eye very well. We can see where it's going. But if we're looking at this down here, you have the sphere here, and in the very next frame, it's right there. That's not good. Suddenly it's going to pop. This is where when we're animating and we're dealing with this cartooniness, a lot of people, they'll exaggerate their timing, they'll exaggerate their spacing, and then it doesn't work, and they go, I must have done something wrong. I must not have pushed it in the right way. I broke something, because visually, like if even just looking at here, there's a lot of space going on right through here. It's not that you did something wrong, it's that we need to lead the audience's eye. And this is where we need to use the concepts of squash and stretch, smears, and lines, which is technically a smear, multiples. We need to basically draw the eye. Now, technically what this is doing, this is kind of an offshoot, all of those terms. So like smear, what did I say? Multiples, motion blur. Motion blur, that's kind of that's a digital smear. That's really what it is. smear, multiples, lines, which is an offshoot of smears. All of these things, what these are not separate concepts or principles all on their own that just do their own thing and hang out on the side. Generally, what these are concepts that tie into and are technically a part of spacing and arcs. So two of the main principles of animation are spacing and our arcs. And the way we push these will determine that motion. So what these are, smears, multiples, lines, are recreation of what happened in real life, which is things smear. So I forgot my hair. I was doing the weird hair thing. Let me fix that. There we go. Getting the sleepy hair there. So if I move my hand slowly, you can see that it's clear, but the faster I move it, you start to see that it just blurs. Technically, my hand isn't blurring in real life. It's a solid, hopefully. But there's this blur to it. It's motion blur. That is the camera, the frame rate of the camera, not keeping up with the motion of my hand. If I was to increase the frame rate of the camera, let's say I had a camera that could go 120 frames per second, you wouldn't see that blur. Now, in real life, if you take your hand and do this, you'll notice that your eyes also have a frame rate. There's an upper limit of motion that at some point your eyes can't keep up with, and it starts to blur it in physical reality. So our eyes have a set kind of frame rate. It's not really a frame rate, but a set limit of motion that it can see clearly before the brain starts interpolating motion together and creating the feeling of a smear. And the reason I say it's the brain is if you were to take, again, high-speed footage of something, every frame would be absolutely clear the whole time, moving in slow motion. It's just our brain not keeping up and taking information and going, okay, it was there, it's there, let's mix them together. So now, when we are applying this into cartoony animation, we have to make that ourselves. You could let the computer do it, but typically in cartoony animation, that's not enough. It's not enough to just let the computer calculate the motion blur, because we want to design that motion. And the reason I was mentioning that it's part of spacing and arcs is not only is that motion going to be very important to kind of show that connection, but we can design that the way it moves. So for example, frame 1 and 2, let's do a smear. Basically, it's just stretching the ball. So on frame 2, you'd have this. There you go. That connects the drawings together. That's what we're doing. So frame 2 is this stretch going from there and dragging back to the beginning. Our eyes now have this flow to there. Maybe on frame 4, we get a little bit more, or it's a little bit kind of forming back up, and then whoop, it kind of maybe overshoots a little bit. I'm going to exaggerate that. And then settles here. There we go. And maybe push that. So you have that. You're using a smear to connect the drawings together, to allow our eye to flow from one pose to the next. Poppiness gone, spacing and timing still super snappy. Now, I've talked about multiples and all of these before, but really the reason these are important is that with smears, it's just kind of connecting drawings. But when you start getting to lines and even the way you use smears, you can push your concept of how they work in a very simple way, which is think of spacing and arcs. So let's say instead of smears, I want to use a multiple. So we've got our main poses here, and I want to keep the poses like relatively in the same shape. Something like this. Well, now how do I connect the eyes of the audience to the original shape? Well, let's use a multiple. A multiple is basically you add more frames. So on frame 2, we'll do this in red for frame 2 here. We just add more frames. So you have the position on frame 2, and then you would just add more spheres. Like that. And that connects the eye. All of this happens on frame 2. So let's do that here. So this is frame 2. So all of this happens on frame 2. For one frame, you're just seeing multiple versions of that sphere. Now, the problem with multiples that people will have right away when they go in is, where do you put the multiple? How do you make that look good? Just space it out. Create a spacing chart. Because it's not going to be a random assortment of poses that are just kind of like randomly set all the way through in the pose or just kind of evenly spaced. Multiples are a visual spacing chart in your animation. So you would go, okay, how's this motion going to work? Maybe there's a little bit of an ease right at the beginning, and then it starts to, let's favor this a little bit more, it speeds up, and then the biggest spacing is going to be still right there. Okay, there you go. There's your spacing chart. And then you put your multiples right there. So maybe this one's going to stretch a little bit. Just start kind of merging those together. And now you've got your multiples that go into frame 2. Now, let's say you've got frame 3 here. Okay, how do you get the sphere to frame 3? Well, it's sped up here. We've got that spacing there. What's going to happen now? Well, if it's easing in, maybe it'll ease in. And maybe this time we'll just use one multiple instead of 2. So maybe we just kind of put it right there. So it's easing in. And add a little bit of a stretch to it, a smear. There we go. So now we have 1. 2 is all of what's in red. That's on one frame. 3, all on one frame. And then we ease in. We've essentially recreated this animation, but in a lot less frames, and the eye of the audience is still going through. And in terms of arcs, well, let's say you had the ball going up here. Well, you could do a straight line, or maybe it's going to be doing something like this. So you start to exaggerate that spacing and how you want to push that arc. Where are you putting these poses to make this read? So for example, I could really push that arc in here. This could technically still be on one frame, but I'm thinking of my arcs, my spacing, and then using that to put in the extra frames in there. And then from there I can keep pushing it, where maybe now we add like these little smear lines like you see in anime. They tend to kind of take the outline and smear it. You could add speed lines where it's just kind of a little something like that. It's just helping to connect the images together, and you can use these. You could just use the lines, you could use the multiples, you could use the smears, you could use all 3 of them together, just 2 of them in whatever order. It's just a tool in your arsenal to connect images together. That's really what you're doing, is you're recreating that real life effect of the eyes not being able to keep up with motion. And that's pretty much it. Now, there are other things like how do you settle the motion? How do you keep the motion from feeling very like just hit a pose, lock, hit a pose, lock? But oftentimes that comes into just pushing your overshoots, pushing your the way your character settles, even though the character hits into frame 5 here, it doesn't mean that they have to just stop dead and freeze. There can be a little settle and kind of a little stop there before they go into frame 13 and have this very fast motion. There might be a kind of anticipation before they turn. So you're using those holds not to do big gestures, but to keep the character alive so that you can make the next parts even faster. So hopefully that helps. That's kind of the core principle of, like, I wouldn't say core principle, but at least for me, this is how I like to think about cartoony animation when I'm starting. Is it's not so much that it's a entirely new branch of animation that is totally foreign and alien. It's just taking our concepts that we already know and exaggerating them to the next level. And that's honestly, like, of everything, and I'm not going to be able to spell in my so tired, exaggeration. This is the core of cartoony animation, is exaggerate everything. You're exaggerating the spacing, you're exaggerating the timing, you're exaggerating the arcs, you're exaggerating your poses. So for example, if you're going to have a character scared of something, let's say they're kind of standing, let's see if I can draw this. I haven't warmed up my drawing hand at all. So maybe they're just kind of standing in a relaxed-ish pose. I'm just gonna do just the body here. I'm not gonna worry about the arms. And then they see something that scares them. Well, let's see. You could go two ways. Maybe the one way is you take this pose and you just push it a little bit, where it's like, oh no, I don't know why I copied it. He kind of pulls away and it's like, gasp. And there's just a little expression change and they kind of just shift their weight further away. So you get, no. Is that going to sell the expression of fear? Or do you go the Scooby-Doo route and just stretch out that pose, the legs come out, and it's just like you have that shake in midair where the shoulders are up, everything is just like straight. If you had the arms here, it would be like that full Scooby-Doo. Oh my god, the eyes could bug out. You just like go all out. How else can we push this? Maybe like they're already starting to run. How can we make this bigger and bigger and bigger? You exaggerate your pose. When you're doing cartoon animation, you're exaggerating everything. That's what makes it interesting. Versus, what? Oh no. That's not a big change. Here you push those brows to be really, really big. I don't know why it's making me laugh. It's not it's not even a good drawing. So it's just exaggeration of everything.